Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you!
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. We are doing something a little bit different on the podcast today. I don't think I've ever done an episode quite like this one. Maybe episode 1 counts. That's the closest episode I can think of. And in that episode, I'm basically like, hi, here are some of my thoughts about friendship if you want to stick around and listen to this podcast. And that's not exactly what we're doing today, but I did share some of my 5, friendship beliefs is what I called them. Which, by the way, if you go back and listen to episode 1, just give episode 1 Alex a hug because, oh my gosh, the amount of anxiety, I was sweating bullets for that episode. I was so nervous to get behind the microphone. Who knows, maybe some of my friendship beliefs maybe have changed since then, although I don't really know if that's true. I think, honestly, doing this work has cemented a lot of them and given me a broader way to speak about them. But maybe I should go back and listen to that episode. And today I'm going to share some of my hot takes about friendship. I thought this might be a fun episode because, 1, I don't collect all my hot takes. Normally I just kind of sprinkle them into the episodes. And 2, if you are new here, maybe this is a fun episode for you to start with. Also, if you have been a listener for a while, this might be a great episode to share with a friend. In fact, please share it with a friend. I would very much appreciate it. So today, as we dive into the hot takes, I also want to tell you that I did not come up with the idea for this episode. If you go and listen to episode 77, my friend Danielle Bayard Jackson is on that episode talking about female friendships. She is also the host of the Friend Forward podcast. And she released an episode talking about her 6 hot takes. I saw that and I just thought, that is a fun idea. I'm inspired. Let's see what my hot takes are. So with that, let's dive in. Hot take number 1. If you've ever heard that phrase that people say where they're like, oh, I just need a few close friends. Or I just really like that really small circle. Maybe they've told you that, I just need to get married or find that romantic partner and I just need one best friend and that's all I need in this lifetime. And my hot take is that, quite frankly, I think that's BS. If there's anything I've learned in doing this work, it's that we all have the, acceptable answer when it comes to our friendships. Kind of the way we talk about these things without actually being honest. It's kind of like when somebody asks you like, oh, how are you doing? And you might have spent all morning crying and panicked and just taking drastic measures. And you would just look at this person and be like, oh, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Just some rough things happened this morning, but I'm good. And it's like, are you really good? I think that if I sat down and I talked with these people who are like, oh yeah, I just need that little circle, or I just need that one best friend. If I sat down and I really started talking to them, because I have done this many times, this scenario, I have experienced it. What happens is people give me that easy answer that, oh yeah, my friendships are great. And then the more that we start talking, the more people start opening up. and start admitting like, oh, well, I actually am really lonely when I work from home, or being a new parent is just so isolating, or I wish I had people to turn to. I could list off 1,000 things that people have told me. But I think when we really get into the nitty-gritty, we all know that we are not meant to go through this life alone. Now, the interesting part of this hot take is that I don't necessarily think that these people need more close friends. They might have enough friends, but I do think that most people need a broader circle. That idea of just this little bitty circle is not enough. That if they were really being honest with themselves, when they say, oh, I get really lonely at home, they might need more simple friendships. When they are isolated as new parents, they might need more community support. I just think that there are these relationships that get discounted as not as valuable, but actually are incredibly valuable, even though they maybe aren't those 2 to 4 people, a romantic partner and a couple of close friends, best friends. We do need this broader circle. How's that for a first hot take? Let's dive into number 2. My second hot take is that we can't keep treating friendship like it is a luxury, because friendship is a lifeline. Now, because of that, I believe that we need to prioritize our friendships, meaning that we need to find the time and we need to do the work to build the connections that we want in our lives. And we need to do the work to integrate into each other's lives more. When I hear people say things like, well, I just don't have time for friendship, or I'll get together with my friends when I have more capacity or when I can fit it in, those are the words in my head where I'm like, oh, you are treating friendship like it is a luxury. Like when you have this uninterrupted time where it's comfortable to get together, you will schedule each other in. Now, if you were to treat your friendships like they are a lifeline, that might look like sacrificing this perfect friend hangout with uninterrupted time where you can just put your phone aside and nobody will interrupt you for kind of a fast, quick hangout. That could be a quick 10-minute phone call. It could be a hangout session where you're kind of, maybe you're working together. Maybe this is a work session. Could be on a passion project, could be on work. It doesn't really matter. But you got together, you're like, hey, we're going to catch up for 30 minutes and then the next 2 hours is work time. And we're just going to silently work next to each other. We're going to chat a little bit at the end about what we're working on and we're going home. That's not 2 interrupted hours, but it's something. I think a great comparison to this would be there's this mainstream conversation that I keep seeing happen about working out. That a lot of people feel like, or maybe felt like for so long, that if they couldn't get in like a full 1-hour workout or a full 1-hour walk or a whatever 5-mile run, it wasn't worth it. And now we're starting to see these conversations saying, if you can only get in a 10-minute walk, 10 minutes of weights, that is impactful. And that is a way of showing that moving our bodies is like so fundamental that it's worth whatever we can squeeze in. Prioritize that. So we can do the same thing with friendship. Instead of waiting for that perfect time to get together at dinner and sit across from each other and give each other uninterrupted attention, we could do the work, because it is a little bit of work to do this, to start to integrate each other into our lives more. And instead of waiting that like year and a half where you have that perfect 2-hour window for dinner, instead, you could do the work of figuring out how to integrate into each other's lives, whether that is those quick 5-minute kind of uncomfortable phone calls where you're like, hey, sorry, I got to hang up. I got to check out at the grocery store. Or maybe it's doing the work of figuring out how to run errands together. or how to casually hang out at each other's houses. Maybe one person's like cleaning and the other person is meal prepping in their kitchen. I don't know. Maybe somebody's fixing a car and somebody's working on their computer. Whatever these are, that is, in my mind, treating friendship like it is a lifeline, like finding that time however we have to do it instead of treating it like a luxury. Hot take number 3. I do not like the term best friend. I think that it's a pretty meaningless label. And I have definitely talked about this before in many other podcast episodes. But in my life outside of the microphone here talking to you, I actually intentionally try not to use the term best friend. I use words like my close friends, my present friends, my everyday friends, the friends that I'm living life with, the friends that I once lived life with. But I don't use the term best friend. Because I think that this idea of a best friend has just been so built up into this all or nothing definition, and that is so unattainable as adults. It's really, really hard. And for some people, maybe they can manage it, but most people, your closest friendships are not going to look like that picture perfect, idealized best friendship. It's just not. And that is okay. That is okay. That can still be, like, seriously, a life-changing friendship, even if it doesn't look like that. It does not need to look like that to have a huge impact on your life. And honestly, these, like, quote unquote, non-best friend looking friendships, they might have more impact because they're real and they're raw and they're authentic than maybe somebody who's trying to force a friendship into kind of that best friend box. Something to think about. But I do want to acknowledge, like, I get where this best friendship concept comes from. And I really do think it comes from childhood. That when we were younger and our worlds were just smaller, we didn't have as many responsibilities and things that were drawing on our attention. We really were like living life with our friends. And our lives were very similar, right? You got up, maybe you had to pack your lunch. It's a big responsibility there. And then you made your way to school, whether that was on foot or by bus or being dropped off in a carpool. And you went through your day where your best friend knew most of your other friends, and they knew your teachers and they knew your class schedule and they were familiar with your school probably. And then you went to your after school activities and you went home to your family and you woke up and you repeated. You were very, very integrated in all these things, and your responsibilities were very similar. Go to school, get good grades, have fun. Maybe you had an after school job, maybe not. Be a kind person, show up for your family. Again, like very similar responsibilities. And when we become adults, there's so little of that overlap. Our friends might be incredibly supportive, but they may not understand firsthand our lives. Like, I don't know about you, but I work here on this microphone, hanging out with you. So many of my friends work in corporate, and they don't fully get what my job and my life looks like. And although they are incredibly supportive, they may not be the friend I can go to for my work stuff. In fact, most of my closest friends are not. I have all sorts of friends who also run their own business, who are maybe not my closest friends, the people I call for all sorts of other things, but they are the first people I call for work things. And that brings me to maybe something you've heard me say before, which is that when people start talking about a best friend as adults, I often ask them, best friend for what? Because one, I want to just break down this term and make it less mainstream. Honestly, I want to start questioning this. But two, I do think it helps people who have felt this pressure their whole lives that they need a best friend. Or maybe they feel like they have a best friend, but then that friendship feels different than it once did. And they can't quite figure out why. Like, shouldn't it always be this all-consuming friendship? Is something wrong with it? And when we start to talk about this idea of best friend for what, people start to see that, like, it's okay if I have a variety of people in my life who support all the unique responsibilities and interests and facets of my personality. And I can have different people I go to for different things, that I can be held by the group instead of by one individual. Because as kids, it was way easier to have one person hold everything for us. It's just really, really not feasible as an adult. This brings me to hot take number 4. And I know I've had plenty of you ask me about this one. I will do a full episode at some point, but I know this one's a hot take. So here's my hot take. We should have friends of the opposite gender. Like, the easiest way for me to explain this to you is often there's this pushback, like, oh, well, you can't be friends with someone because you might fall in love with them. You might develop romantic feelings. You might this, you might that. And my statement is always like, don't we all have, in my case, right? I'm an adult woman. I have a brother. I have cousins. I have a father-in-law. I have brothers-in-law. I have all these people that I have a relationship with that is purely platonic. I understand what that relationship looks like. And that is what I would tell you about having friends of the opposite gender, is that we need more platonic connections with people who aren't like us. And I mean, I'm talking about gender, but in many different episodes, I've talked about how I think we need diversity in our friendships overall. Different ages, different life situations, different life choices, different financial backgrounds, different religions, life experiences. Like, the more variety we have in the people we surround ourselves with, I believe that's the more windows we end up with into different ways to live. That in this world of 8 billion plus people, when we see all this variety, it helps us determine what I as an individual actually want. Because even though if I surround myself with people who are all like me, but I have a different dream and I don't see that represented, I may never go after it. I may never experience it. I may never learn about it. Not to mention, just the more variety we have in people, the more we can exist, like the more trust we have in those weak ties. And I've talked about that in other episodes. But to bring this back to the gender thing, not only do I just think like it is good for us as humans to figure out how to maintain platonic relationships with people of the opposite gender. That's that. The other reason for me and my work, and the reason I talk about this stuff, is that although I'm on here talking about how to help you as an individual build the relationships that you need in your life, my bigger goal in all of this work is that we feel more connected as people in this world, that there is less division, more understanding, that we can move through the world with more trust. And I firmly believe that in order for that big, crazy, scary goal to happen, I can't just be out here telling you like to make a bunch of friends, again, with people who are just like you, with the same gender, because then we just end up with like the boys camp and the girls camp and the they camp, and everybody's still separate. And I don't think that that actually is going to bring us together to this place of more community connection, support, understanding, trust, safety that a lot of us want in this world. And that one huge piece of that is each of us as individuals figuring out how to have these relationships and reconnect our own circles and not silo ourselves off from any platonic connection, in my case, like with men, who I was like, nope, no, and I don't think that's helpful. So that's that hot take that I will definitely do an episode about and go deeper into, but I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Sorry, not sorry. Hot take number 5. This one's inspired by a recent message I got, actually. And that is that the more that we try to anticipate the changes that will take place in your friendship, the more you're holding yourself back. Now, this is inspired by a message I recently got from someone who was asking me, this person, it sounds like, because it was a very brief message, has decided that they want to be child-free by choice. And they are in this age where people are starting to have kids around them. And they said, how do I continue to feel inspired to befriend people that I know will have kids? Meaning that they are already anticipating that, like, if I make this friendship, it's going to be different because they're going to have kids and their responsibilities are going to change and their spontaneity is going to change and their routines are going to change. And it really just kind of blew my mind, because if you walk through the world that way, how much are you cutting yourself off to potential friendships? And it's not just that question. I mean, I can think back kind of on the opposite side. A few years ago, I was talking to someone, this conversation just really stands out. It was a friend of a friend, and she said, well, I don't want to make any new friends until after I have kids. And in my head, I'm just thinking like, oh, okay, well, when is that going to be? Is that 1 year, 5 years, 7 years? Like, what happens if you, like many people out there in the world, experience struggles conceiving? So you're just not going to make any connections that support you or enrich this season of your life because your life's going to change? What? I just don't understand. My final example for this is actually a personal story. I have a friend of mine who experienced she experienced a very serious loss about a year ago. And when she experienced this loss, she took a sabbatical from work without trying to give it away. Like, this rocked her world. Okay? That's what I'm going to say about that. And we had a great friendship. Now, she's not one of my closest friends, but we did a lot of things together. We had a lot of fun together. We traveled together. And after she experienced this loss, her way of grieving was to really lean on family and lean on a couple of close friends that do not include me. And that is great. And that is fine. And I'm happy for her that she has what she needs. This is no commentary of who she's choosing to lean on in her grief. What it is that I never could have anticipated that our friendship would change. You can't control this. You just can't. We had a great friendship, and now it's kind of come to a halt, and I have no doubt that it will slowly come out of hibernation. I just want to be here to support her however she needs, and right now she needs just a few people in her life and a lot of time for reflection, and I want her to have that. But I'm just trying to say, I couldn't have anticipated this. Surprises and changes happen all the time. So if you're trying to anticipate all the changes and you're holding back because of it, you are denying yourself so many possibly rich, life-changing, or maybe just simple and meaningful connections. Hot take number 6. Most of us are convinced that we are oversharers, but we are in fact undersharing in our friendships. Now, there are so many reasons for this one. I mean, I think just generally as a society, something I've talked about in other episodes, we have this distrust in our weak ties and in our community overall, and therefore we are less likely to share. But I also think that so many of us have convinced ourselves that our friends either don't care, they don't have the capacity, they don't have time. And so there are all these moments where we want to tell someone about our lives and we just hold back. We don't send the text message with the news. We don't make the phone call. We don't share the thing when we're asked. How many of you out there wish that you felt more connected to your friends? Wish that they maybe asked more about your life? And simultaneously, there are moments where you have news you could share and you don't actually hit send. Like you're waiting for them to ask you instead of you initiating the share. Or your friends do ask, and instead of giving them the actual answer, you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. Life's good. The trip was good. And the only way that you really do share is if your friends actually start like, oh, okay, well, I'm happy it was good, but tell me something fun you did. Or was that person you were anxious about seeing there, right? Like until they really dig, you don't share. How many of us are doing that? Pay attention next time, because I really think we've convinced ourselves that anything we tell somebody about ourselves is like TMI. How many times are you using that phrase? Like, oh, TMI. And then you share something totally normal or not normal. Like, if you think about it, you want to know your friends. Why have we all convinced ourselves our friends don't want to know us? Let's reflect on that. Hot take number 7. Now, I know earlier in this episode, I talked about maybe having this bigger, broader group and community in your life, mainly having like more connections, right? And for a lot of people, that's going to be overwhelming because you're like, oh, well, now I have to balance these connections. And you start to maybe feel this thing of like, oh, well, now I need to invite everyone to everything. And so my 7th hot take here is that it is totally cool not to be invited. And I know this one is really going to push some people. I am well aware, but it's cool not to be invited. In fact, sometimes I love not being invited. And it actually, I think most people are going to think that's because I don't want to go to the party or I don't want to do the thing. That is not why. I love not being invited because it means that the person who didn't invite me, hopefully, was being intentional about the connections they did want to pour into. And this time, it's not me, because it doesn't always have to be me. So let me give you an example of this. I have talked about kind of this bigger friend group I have before. And in this group, not only is this kind of like this bigger group, there's a bunch of kind of like littler groups and dynamics within there. Some like friend trios, some of them have overlap, some of them don't. And then obviously there's like all these individual friendships. I mean, I'm talking about, 7 to 9 people here. There's a lot of dynamics. And these friends are kind of spread out across the country now. Some of us are still here in Seattle. There are 3 very close friends in this kind of bigger group. Now, I am good friends with all 3 of the girls in this trio, but they know each other from things like before me. And I have developed good friendships with all of them. And sometimes I might hang out with, let's say, 2 of them. So I kind of like overlap in this trio. Now, recently, the 3 of them got together to celebrate. They have a tradition where they get together for lunch to celebrate birthdays. And I was not invited. And I was happy for them. I was like, yes. And because, guys, like they told me, like we got together, the 3 of us, they told me I wasn't invited. Straight up. And I was like, oh my gosh, was that such a good lunch? Did the 3 of you have a good time together? I love that you keep up that tradition. It's cool to not be invited because I am so happy for them that they are investing in their dynamic. And I love when I invest with my dynamic with some of them or with all of them. And that might look like me and one of those friends getting together to do something. I mean, just this morning, a different friend in that trio, we decided to take a trip together. I have like other groups of friends. And if I tell these friends like, hey, I'm going to go see so-and-so, they're only responsive like, oh my gosh, have so much fun. And so I guess where I'm going here is that like, there is so much importance in investing in the individual friendships in a bigger, broader group, whether that is a friend trio or a bigger friend group, or honestly, a meeting or a gathering or a company or a culture. And not every one of those is for me. And instead of being upset that I wasn't invited, I'm honestly more interested about like, what is that dynamic that's holding them together? And how can I celebrate and encourage that so that they have what they need? And that doesn't have to include me. Let me know if you want a bigger episode on that. I probably should do a bigger episode. I feel like that's hard for me to explain in just a hot take, which will move us on. We're going to go to hot take number 8. Hot take number 8 is that most people aren't spending enough time with their friends. Just going to say it like it is. And that's going to get people all upset. Like, I don't have time. I don't have this. I don't have that. There's this thing, I've talked about it before, called the American Time Use Survey. The Census Bureau for the US does this. In 2021, it was shown that Americans spend 2 hours and 45 minutes a week with their friends, which is not very much time. Like, if we go back to one of my original hot takes that friendship isn't a luxury, it is a lifeline. 2 hours and 45 minutes a week to invest in your lifeline is, I just don't think, enough time. I don't. So my hot take is that we need to do more of that, like integrating with each other, more of that trying to just fit it in sometimes, like admitting it's okay to just fit in friendship. I feel like if I said that out loud, somebody would be like, well, that's not very kind to your friendship. And it's like, but isn't it? Because if I can manage to get a couple more hours of connection with this friend this year, isn't that meaningful? Even if it came in little spurts? I think so. Hot take number 9. I think that a lot of times we equate friendship to comfort. And I just don't think that true friendship, real friendship, requires us to be comfortable all the time. In fact, I think that being uncomfortable will probably lead us to better friendships and a more aligned community. So we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable as quickly as possible, and we need to normalize that. The reason I think it's important to be uncomfortable, just in like our individual relationships to start, the idea, right, of like this friend is just so easy, it's so comfortable, it's so effortless, is like not the reality. Any relationship is work. We have to navigate challenges. We have to have that conversation we've been dreading. We have to tell our friend that they hurt our feelings. We have to, even on a fun note, like we have to suggest new ways to spend time together or things to do that maybe we've never done. Maybe this is like your closest friend and you've never, let's say, traveled anywhere together and you've always wanted to do that and you need to suggest that. Like, that's uncomfortable. So the sooner we can be okay with the fact that that discomfort is what is helping this friendship grow, the better it will be. The second place that I think that it's really important to consider this is actually another question somebody asked me recently. They were like, I just keep trying to make connections and every time I meet people, I don't click with them. And one of my first questions back to this person was, where are you going to meet people? Because if, let's say, this person really is looking for like an outdoorsy friend, they want to go hiking or biking or skiing, but they keep going to a friend of a friend's movie night, you are less likely to meet somebody who's super outdoorsy because that gathering is centered around movies. It's not centered around being super active. Now, you might meet somebody there. You very well might. But this person is probably going there because it's comfortable. It would be uncomfortable to, let's say, go join a hiking group or a mountaineers club by themselves. But if they did that, they would be more likely to make the types of connections they want to make. So when everyone is out here talking about how friendship is meant to be comfortable and easy and effortless, my hot take is that I actually think the more uncomfortable you can be and the more you can get used to that, the more aligned your community and your friendships will be. Which brings me to my last and final hot take of this episode, which is that making friends is a lifelong adventure. Now, I know that there's lots of messaging out there that talks about, just find your close friend and hold on to them forever, or you just need to like find that one person and then that's it. It's kind of like dating. It's like if you do the work of dating for friends, you never have to do it again. And that is such a lie. It's such a lie. We are going to be making new friends until we're in the grave. With every new version of yourself, new interests, new passions, perhaps like a new place to live, a new hobby or interest, you are going to need to replace friends or add friends. This might not mean adding close friends. It might just be some of those simpler friendships or new community, but it also might be new close friends. Because if you don't allow for those simpler connections to come in, how are you going to meet potentially like your closest friends that you have 2 decades from now? And I think that the sooner we can all lean in and accept that this is a never-ending journey, the better off we'll be. What'd you think of the hot takes? I would love to hear from you. Some of these, again, are going to be familiar out there, but some of them are new, some I haven't really touched on, or some are things I haven't said maybe as directly as I said today. I'd love to know which ones you agree and disagree with, because I do think that there are some that a lot of people are going to not want to hear, probably is a good way to put it. What hot takes do you have? I'd also love to hear some of your hot takes. Send me a message or a DM or a voice memo. I learn just as much from you all as you learn from me. So let's keep the conversation going on this one. And with that, I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander. Or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.